Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Claire Munoz, and I'm the Charles and Mathewson Senior Director of Education and Engagement. We're thrilled to have you here today. We have a lot of enthusiasm and excitement for today's program. I'm going to turn the mic over in just a moment to Bill Fox, the Peter Poole Director of the Center for Art and Environment. We are very much looking forward to this entire weekend culmination of the performance that we're expecting this weekend. I'm sure many of you, most of you probably have tickets. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bill. Thank you. Oh, and a reminder, your sticker includes your admission. So after the program today, you're welcome to go into the galleries. We encourage you to do so. The exhibition is mounted on the second floor, and we'd love to see you in the galleries after this program. Bill.
Thank you, Claire, and hi, everyone. Probably I've seen some of you before in the first event that we had in this kind of series of public conversations about the collaboration between the Nevada Museum of Art and the Reno Philharmonic. This is the only one of these events that's actually taking place in the museum. And so I want to take the opportunity today to focus just a little bit about what the Anthropocene is and what that relationship is with our museum and how that leads to what turns out to be, I think, a globally significant collaboration. I don't know of any other artwork that's being produced like this right now.
I think you're absolutely right, Bill.
Yeah. So we collect archives from around the world at the Center for Art and Environment of artists' creative interactions with human beings, between human beings and their environments, natural, built, and even virtual. We have going on, I mean, it's more than 1.5 million items in that archive now. So we have the archive of the largest art and climate change organization in the world. It's been going for almost 20 years. It's based out of close to London. And that's one of the most major archives about this particular moment in art history that exists on the planet. I'm going to make a statement that's not been made before, and I hope you'll follow me with this. This museum is a creature of the Anthropocene. The center is the leading edge of that, the sharp point of that. And I'm going to back that up by telling you just a couple of things. The Anthropocene, as defined by Paul Crutzen, Nobel-winning atmospheric, stratospheric chemist, who discovered, along with a couple of other people, the mechanism for the destruction of the ozone layer in our atmosphere. In 2000, he's in a meeting in Guadalajara. It's a meeting of geomorphologists, the people who actually talk about the surface of the planet and how it changes. And for most of the career of this planet, the biggest agent of change has been rain. That stopped being true at the beginning of the Roman Empire, the height of the Roman Empire, right? Around the birth of Christ. A little after, a century after, because people were moving more dirt with shovels at that point than rain was. And there, at that time in the entire world, there were fewer than 100 million people, right around 100 million people. So we don't, as human beings, count very well. We don't understand those numbers very well. So in Paul Crutzen in Guadalajara, they're talking about the Holocene. The Holocene is the last 10,000 years. Maybe 12,000 years. It's the end of the Ice Age until now. It's been conceived of as a relatively climate stable regime, right? And Crutzen is shaking his head. Everybody else is going, Holocene, Holocene. He's going like this. Well, as a Nobel Prize winner, people are noticing, like, what's wrong with Dr. Crutzen, right? And he says, we're not in the Holocene anymore. We're in the Anthropocene. And everybody stops dead. And you can hear this wave go around the world. Every geologist on the planet went, huh? Because what he said is, look, since I did the work on the ozone hole, what I've been doing is I've been looking at ice cores from around the planet, everywhere I can drill down in the ice. And I see that in the 1790s, there's this strata of carbon that appears in the ice cores. That comes from Welsh coal being burned in England at the start of the Industrial Revolution when James Watt invented a really efficient steam engine that became commercially viable. You can trace down that exact date, that exact event when that happens by looking at the isotopes of the carbon. It tells you exactly where it came from. Welsh coal. So he said, ever since 1790, roughly, we've created a new geological epoch, which is defined by a worldwide strata. That's how you define a change in epoch on the planet, right? So we're not in the Holocene anymore, we're in the Anthropocene. That means that human beings have as much to do with anything else on this planet about its chemistry, and about how we're changing the planet and the climate regime. If you have a checkbook and you own an automobile, you know the science behind this. It's very simple. If you can add, subtract, and come up with a balance, you know what climate change is all about. If you have an automobile, you believe in science because it took you here. So there's no arguing with this. It's just facts. That's all it is. It's not interpretation. It's just factual. The Anthropocene has 3 stages. One is a long, slow buildup of traces of different chemicals in the atmosphere and in the soils. That goes from 1790 till about 1950. In 1950, something extraordinary happens. And that is when what Dwight D. Eisenhower, our president, called the military-industrial complex, right? The great machine that we built to prosecute successfully World War II, right? That machine turns its effort to selling us products around the world. And that's when we buy a lot of toasters, right? And that's when, and that is also the time when all of us, those of us, I'm 72, I'm baby boomer, right? All of us and our parents are going around the world for the first time collecting stuff. So it's a big change, right? And so the great acceleration happens. And, that is where you can measure the great acceleration by the number of McDonald's established around the world. You can measure it by the amount of paper produced. You can measure it by the carbon footprint, by how much nitrogen gets unleashed in the atmosphere free because you're creating, how do you say it? Fertilizer, right? For industrial agriculture. So you can trace all of those things. And again, if you have a checkbook, you know how to add this stuff up. It's pretty simple. Well, if you add all that stuff up, it starts to heat things up. So one of the things that we power this enormous acceleration of the human race is we bring forward the past in the form of fossil fuels. These have not been wandering around the surface of the planet for millions and tens of millions and hundreds of millions of years, and we start to burn them now. So we brought the energy budget of the past into the present all at the same time, all around the world, and the place starts warming up. If you have a checkbook, you know the math. It's really simple, right? So the Nevada Museum of Art is started by the 2 guys, James Church and Charles Cutts. Church is a professor of classics at UNR. His ambitions to be a polar explorer. He climbs Mount Rose every winter to stay tough, right? Several times, but before the Mount Rose Highway is there, right? And Church, when asked by the president of the university, Dr. Church, why are you climbing Mount Rose every winter? And he says, oh, well, I'm measuring the water content of snow so we can tell the farmers in Fallon how much water we'll have to irrigate with in the spring. And the president says, jolly good, carry on, right? Never bothers him again. What Church is doing as an excuse to be an explorer, he's got to have a project, right? What he's doing is forming one of the first significant worldwide climate data sets. He doesn't call himself a climate scientist. He's not. He has other things in mind. But that's what he's doing. And that, by the way, the method he used to measure the water content of snow is roughly the way we do it now. I mean, it's a little more complicated now, but basically it's the same thing. So he wants a place with his friend Charles Cutts, who's a book and basket and tchotchke collector of magnitude in Carson City. The 2 of them want to have a place where they can get together and have a conversation with scientists, artists, humanists, and talk about the state of the world. And that's the beginning of the Nevada Art Museum. Cutts, by the way, is a world-class book collector. He's got dealers from all over the world sending him books. He's got a book he brought that was published in 1911. It's called Art and Environment. This isn't our roots, guys. I mean, come on. So when the Center for Art and Environment is started, it arises from the Altered Landscape Collection. And that's a collection that started in the late 80s, and now it has, I think, close to 3,000 items in it. With the latest edition of the Nolan Priest things, I think we're coming up close to that. It's a most significant signature collection that we have in this museum. It's world-renowned. It's had 2 books published. It's traveled around the planet. Why? Because nobody else was forming a collection that showed the impact of human beings on the surface of the earth. It's kind of like photography and geomorphology, right? So that collection inspired the museum to start the Center for Art and Environment. What do we collect? We collect evidence of the Anthropocene. We collect mostly stuff from the 1960s onward. It's artists who are involved in dealing with and sometimes trying to directly affect change on the planet. And they're hyper alert to the science behind this. So Creighton announces, the Anthropocene in 2000. He publishes his first major paper in Nature in 2002. And a bunch of us have been writing about it ever since and collecting and doing whatever. So this museum is deeply implicated in the Anthropocene. So when you guys show up And Jimmy comes to look at the photographs in the altered landscape collection. You have a very nice explosion, to use Claire's word. You have this extraordinary crossing of disciplines. And scientists nowadays, the data sets are so big that in order to understand change in these data sets, I mean, billions of numbers of atmospheric measurements and so forth, they sometimes sonify data. They turn it into sound so they can hear the differences and they can pick up patterns and they can measure those patterns electronically. What Jimmy has done is not a sonification. He's done something that is another order higher. So he's actually created a metaphor about the sonification, about the science, and about our relationship to all of this stuff. So what I'd like to do is start, Jimmy, by asking you, how did you feel when you first looked at those photographs? We're in the library and we're looking through this book with all these photographs. What was your first reaction to all that?
Well, my first reaction actually came when Laura sent me the books. So that was my first contact with the collection. And I had a visual reaction. Some of the pictures really spoke to me. Some of them are very striking, others are very subtle, but they all carry this underlying message that I was trying to identify. So coming to the museum kind of helped me understand the collection as a whole. Talking to you today with and visiting the museum itself and looking at the archives as well. Gave me a broader understanding of what the collection is about. And well, the first thing I experienced was an emotional reaction. When we are like met with scientific data, usually we don't react emotionally. It is difficult for the general public to relate to those numbers, and I think scientists have had a difficult time communicating with people outside of their field about the gravity. Oh yeah, can you hear me now? Okay. So scientists have had a difficult time communicating the seriousness, I think, of the issue. And so I felt that the photographic collection served as a bridge in a way, because it elicits a very emotional, direct response, but then it invites you to understand more what's behind the pictures. And that's what I felt I wanted to do with the work as well. First of all, the collection is on its own a wonderful thing that doesn't need any addition, and it doesn't need a soundtrack for sure. You know, what I wanted to do or achieve with the symphony was really seeing the collection through the eyes of music, or like, which is a little synesthetic actually. It's crossing of sensations and processing of senses. So I wanted to just to add another dimension, and I wanted to contribute to raising awareness about an issue that, I mean, all of us have been hearing about for a long time, but we still have a lot of resistance to understanding what is behind it. And I feel that this issue is so beyond just data, politics, ideologies. It just has to deal with human survival, our understanding with nature, our relation with the planet, and hence, you know, the symphony was kind of a looking inwards of sorts, trying to understand what the relationship is. But the piece, as you said, had to be informed by the science. I didn't want it to be just, you know, this emotional adventure into the world of the collection. I wanted the symphony to have a direct relationship with what is happening and the data that was collected. And that's when I started to draw parallels between some of the parameters. Like, you know, I visited, you know, first of all, I took as a reference the socioeconomic trends and the earth trends. What we call earth trends are, for example, ocean acidification and carbon emissions, and socioeconomic trends are the increase in population or travel, for example. And so when you measure those, you end up with a set of data that creates this exponential graph that is precisely what, you know, refers, the graph spikes between 1950 and 2010, which is the data that I collected ends. And you can see very clearly how humans have impacted Earth. It's so clear. And I also felt that the term, the Great Acceleration, carried a musical resonance to it. It had a musical ring. So I felt this is just something that I want to focus on. So that's why the first movement focuses on that.
So, and let me just add to this that these graphs that he's talking about are upstairs as part of the exhibit here. So they're in the glass case in the middle, and you'll see exactly the things that he was looking at. And just to make sure everybody's on the same page, the great acceleration is specifically the first movement. So that's the first 17 minutes. It's the largest section of the symphony, but that's where he's sort of demarcating this this trend from 1950 to the present.
That's right. And so what I really wanted to do was, music actually uses frequencies, which are measured in hertz. And we use tempo, which are measured in beats per minute. Those are two important parameters that when you relate, when you make correlation between them in an XY axis, you actually can find that, either your tempo increases or your pitches go higher. So I felt like, wow, this is the way that you represent how things are intensifying in this period can be very visceral too. Because there is something about the acoustic feeling of feeling a whole orchestra accompanying this kind of movement and the increase in tension, that leads to this moment of collapse almost at the end of the movement, right? And this is where the piece is most connected with the scientific data that we collected. However, there is also a very emotional aspect to it, and that is when Laura came to me at the midst of the pandemic, actually, and she said, I think we need to rethink our project, because the original idea was basically to make the whole symphony about the acceleration. But, the pandemic started, and even our project was impaired. So very thankful to the Reno Philharmonic and their donors for making it, keeping it in the way it was originally intended. But Laura, you had a very important thing to tell me. I mean, that was that, I think we need to find a way to incorporate what we're experiencing now into the piece.
Yeah, I mean, there was a moment when I got in my car. I was at the grocery store, with the mask on. Everybody's freaking out. Before vaccines, it was just a terrifying time. And what became clear to me, I mean, I know that every composer I know, their projects were being canceled left, right, center, because every orchestra had the sense that we don't know what our future is. We don't know where we're going from here. We don't know when we're going to do another concert or how and what kind of shape we're going to be in. And of course, yes, I'm very grateful to the donors that kept it alive and committed, and we forged into my board and staff that we actually kept this on the books. But I got in my car and I called up David Walker and I said, David, our projects, Altered Landscape, yes, it's connected to this photographic collection, but it is clear that you and I are sitting in an altered landscape, that we will forever be in an altered landscape because of this pandemic. We cannot unlearn what we have learned. We cannot unexperience what we've experienced. And I said, are you okay if I add that dimension to this project? Because I really believe that art is for the purpose of helping us grapple with our lives. And it helps us deal with this issue by reflecting on these photographs and by listening to this music. But also, it helps us process this incredibly frightening experience, certainly that we were in at the time. So then I had to call Jimmy up after I knew he was working on this piece already and had he had a sense of how this was going to go. And I said, Jimmy, what do you think of in some way making the pandemic part of this piece? I didn't want to take us off track, but I wanted us to wrap it into it because I felt like it was unavoidable.
And really, my reaction at first was not quite receptive, because I had, well, I was working so hard on it already. I mean, I hadn't written the music yet, but I do a lot of research, and that involved everything, regarding the museum and all the data that I was collecting and turning into graphs. So when the idea of restructuring the whole piece came to me, it meant, wow, it's almost like you tell an architect your building is not going to be 20 stories, it's going to be 40 stories now. And it's like, well, that changes everything fundamentally. So I had to go back to a drawing board and think, but it made sense the more I thought of it. And it made sense to me as an artist too, to incorporate that, even as we were living through it, because I didn't experience writer's block, but I think I might have experienced it had I not written a piece that spoke to the circumstances that I was living at that time, because that allowed me to process things and really pour things into the music. So this is when we have like this very, very like data-driven, scientifically, informed first movement, and we have these other three that deal more with the emotional aspects that, especially the pandemic, brought to us. And the second movement is called Stillness, or a direct allusion to the fact that the world came to a halt, and that we were forced to just deal with ourselves. And that actually also had an impact in our environment, in fact. So that was very interesting too. So I thought this is really intrinsically connected with the outer landscape collection. And as you said, we have entered an outer landscape, and the more the pandemic lasted, and goes on to this day, so the bigger the footprint that it's going to make. And then the last two movements, called Reckoning and Alignment, are more a vision into the future. Reckoning is more like the moment where we have all processed the pandemic, learned its lessons, meditated upon what it is that we need to do next. So it's a moment of reflection. And then the fourth movement, Alignment, was actually inspired by one set of photographs that it doesn't necessarily belong to the collection, but are housed in the museum. You show me these books with like the most incredible designs by architects and engineers envisioning technologies that were, for example, saline plants that were transforming, ocean water into potable water, but with the use of solar energy, or like self-sustainable skyscrapers that were like cities in their own right.
That's a land art generator initiative. Yeah.
Yeah, that was so inspiring. And I remember I showed it to Laura, and Laura and I were looking at this and we're like, well, perhaps not all is lost, There might be hope for humanity. And there is actually a large group of people out there who are working for solutions. As we are sometimes in the debate of like renewable energy and electric cars and oil, etc. But we don't know that there's like an army of people working right now for solutions that will actually bring, we'll see them in action, but not now. And many of those projects will never see the light of day, but some of them will. And so alignment kind of is that hopeful, future where we have actually learned to coexist in harmony with our planet, and we have learned how to use, our resources in a more harmonious way.
So the Anthropocene is defined by Kreutzmann and his colleagues. Has three stages, right? First stage is that long, slow buildup. Second stage is the great acceleration. The third stage is one where the society becomes self-aware about this entire dynamic, and it starts to think about, how do we address this? The Land Art Generator Initiative, those things you looked at, by the way, they just did a project out of a big competition at Burning Man. And they want to make a structure out in the desert, 100 miles north of here, that is a self-sustaining, power-generating water purification system that can help host people, year-round out there to kind of deal with the principles of Burning Man. So they've been doing this in major cities around the world, and the first one is being built in Melbourne. So it's tremendous, yeah.
So, I mean, that is very inspiring. And that's when, after I saw that, that's when I said, okay, we got a symphony now. Because, we need, and the symphonic form is such that really it allows you to deal with grand subjects. And, in the, Gustav Mahler, one of the great symphonists, always thought of the symphony as a self-contained world. And I also like to think of it in that way because I feel that it usually grows from a single cell, but it creates all this, wealth of organisms and life that comes through it. It's almost as if you see those little cells, those motifs, on a journey and growing into, monumental heights. And this is what happens in the symphony as well.
I mean, it's a symphony. It's like the life experience. Usually, like on a good day, with a good or a good life with a happy ending. You have your you have your issues. You sort of deal with them. You have tranquil moments, whatever, and there's a resolution at the end. And this symphony definitely, I think, really hits all of this. And I really love the parallel, that you're starting with the great acceleration in this scientific data and the photographs and all of that. And then the stillness, yes, it's the pandemic coming into that and responding to what we were seeing in newspapers and online of empty streets, completely empty streets of cities that are notoriously completely polluted. Suddenly the air is clear. You see airports where the airplanes are on the ground, all of those things. There was this, this halting. And then what happens when we stop? What happens when we stop as we contemplate? We are stuck with ourselves with no distraction. And there is a way, there were so many people that were making huge changes coming out of the sort of epicenter of the isolation. So many people were making changes in how they live, in what they do for work, how much they work, where they live, quality of life. Those kinds of decisions come out of taking that moment to stop. It's out of that reckoning, really. And we also, it helps us as a society and as a globe face the larger questions of how we exist as a dance partner with this planet. And so, my hope is that we have this sort of parallel journey in this performance and in the experience of Jimmy's symphony, that it's a spiritual one and also one of action, one of positive action that leads us to a place of sustainability.
So about 10 years ago, the National Academy of Sciences in Washington commissioned a study about the disconnect between the production of scientific knowledge and policy change, politics and policy change. And what they found out is that scientists are really good at collecting data, and they're really good at taking the data and transforming it into information that, through graphs and through meetings and seminars and other conferences. Then, and this is to get here, from here up to where the policies are formulated, right? And what the politics are that put those policies in place. There's a great gap, a sparsely populated domain, right? Because the scientists are trained not to express emotion. The credibility of their findings has to subtract emotion so that it's just your checkbook, right? So the guys writing the report said, that sparsely populated domain is where the humanities and the arts live. If you want to affect people up here making policy, that data and the information have to become emotional. They have to be informed by emotion, and they have to be shared publicly through different kinds of art making and humanistic discussions. And then they can hear what the data is. They can understand the knowledge, and they will act on it. So this is one of those major cornerstones of this effort of involving the arts and humanities in a scientific discussion that is existential in nature for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about, hoping to affect the folks up here and having impact with this project, this is not just about this weekend. This is not just about this performance. What we are hoping to do is have a whole nother chapter that lives on after this weekend. And that is about a partnership with the Nature Conservancy that we've developed. What we are doing is asking symphonies around the globe to perform this work for free. Typically with a commissioning model, they would have to rent this piece and pay a fee to the Reno Phil for the privilege of performing it within the first 2 years. We are asking them to, go ahead, perform it, giving it as a gift, instead of donating as a fee, give it directly to the Nature Conservancy so that future performances of this symphony will have actual impact in the fight against the climate crisis. And we have a compatriot right here in the hall. Yes. We have a specific soldier that has been out there putting this symphony out all over this is Scott Faulkner, who is right here with us. And we've tasked him. He's not only playing bass in the orchestra, he's contacting orchestras all over the planet. I think he's reached out to like 100 different orchestras, and some of them overseas, and let them know that this is happening. We will have lots of orchestra administrators and personnel watching the performances via live stream and then looking at them on demand after. And we have some that have signed on already, many that have expressed interest and reached out to Scott. So it's very exciting about that next chapter. It makes me feel great that we give life to this symphony just in terms of pure art. I really believe in living composers. I believe in what they do for us. And it's a tragedy when new works are only performed once, and that's what usually happens. You do the world premiere and then it's over. I love that these institutions have invested in making sure that doesn't happen with this one. So yes, I'm hoping that it will have a huge and long afterlife, not only for the future of new music, but also for the fight against climate change.
Indeed, and I think the fact that, if the piece travels as planned, and I think it will, when it is presented elsewhere, that also gives opportunities for that local orchestra to create dialogues like the ones we're having, to create partnerships with their local museums, to create awareness about their local nature conservancy branches. So it amplifies everything that we're doing here elsewhere. So if the orchestra wants, they can present the work as a musical piece, but they can choose to create dialogue, to actually bring either digital renderings of the photographs or bring the actual exhibit that is now on display, the physical photographs to their places, and also address the issues that are peculiar to their own regions. Like in California, where I live, we have wildfires that have been ravaging the state. But then if you go to tropical areas, you have hurricanes, or other areas you have tornadoes. And so the issues of climate change are affecting us all at a global level, but how they affect us are very different. So I think that if we are able to really work on at the local level, it will be able to resonate with people because it's something that they are experiencing themselves. They only pay attention. We only pay attention when it becomes personal.
We have about 10 minutes left, and I would like to ask the audience if you guys have questions for Jimmy and Laura. Sarah has a question. Yeah.
Yeah, she asked for how long I worked on this piece of music. Well, there are many answers to that, but from the moment I started writing the music to the end, it's about 7 months. But the project has been in the works for 3 years. And the planning stages, even for myself, the research stages at another 2-3 months to that period. So it's it's something that requires a lot of research and work, but I don't know, you can add something to that.
Oh my goodness. It has been such a journey, this whole project. There's something just very, very special about the precariousness of doing this, of changing course, of making it all happen in the middle of a pandemic. And it's so triumphant that we are here at this moment and actually able to perform this work at all, with Triple Wind, the big orchestra on stage. It's really just that in and of itself feels really wonderful. In terms of how long I've worked on this symphony, oh my goodness. I mean, as soon as I got the first score, we were going back and forth, and we actually made some changes. There were just some, you look at something and think, well, if it was written this way, how about this? It might be a little easier. So it's like sculpting, you sort of have he puts it all down. The idea is there. You could see the statue, but then you're whittling away the little details of what makes it more translatable to musicians so that they can execute his vision. And in a way, it's still happening. I mean, just before we started this talk, Jimmy and I were looking at the score, and I'm asking him, can the violins play with this kind of articulation instead of really on the string? They're going to be off the string and really heavy because the momentum of this acceleration needs that kind of feeling. And So we're continuing to whittle away at it. There's so much specificity that is demanded when you take a piece from the two-dimensionality of pieces of paper and then breathe life into it. So it's in time and space and performed by so many different people on stage at once. There are all kinds of decisions you have to make. So it's one of the things that I love to do the most. This is where I come alive. This means so much to me to bring a new work into being and to be able to work in real time with a creative mind like Jimmy, to be able to ask him questions. You can't do that with Beethoven, you know? So it's just, I just find it absolutely thrilling. It's terrifying, but it means the world to me to be at this moment and to have the opportunity to bring these issues to the fore and to bring this wonderful music to the fore as well.
Yes, the person right in the middle here. Yeah.
That is one of the most nerve-wracking things about a commissioning project is finding the right fit, the right person to take on that project. Because I want so many things. I want a great piece of music, period. But I also want a piece of music that's going to speak to you when you're sitting out in that hall hearing it for the first time. I want you to love it. I want a piece that the musicians are going to be completely engaged by, and they're going to love so much and believe in that they're going to practice and practice and practice to make it sound really fabulous. So, and then also it's somebody who can take an idea and a topic, and particularly one that is that sort of thorny and challenging as one that's about climate issues, and make that sing, make that whole thing come together. So I spent a couple of years searching for a composer, and I considered many. I first encountered Jimmy's music. I was working with a really wonderful string orchestra, the Sphinx Virtuosi, and I was coaching them on this piece by this person I'd never heard of before, Guardian of the Horizon by Jimmy López Bellido. And so I was studying the score. I went and started rehearsing with them, and then I called them up, and I'm like, "This piece is so incredible. Who are you?" Like, so we talked. That was the first time, and then still, I was checking out his music online, seeing where he was performing. I was stalking him, basically. There was a workshop of a performance that came to Ann Arbor, which is where I am when I'm not here. And I got to hear live a piece that he had just created. So I knew what his newest music was like. And I really felt like, okay, this is somebody that I think can be a good chemistry fit with this community and could be a good fit for this project. So, and then I angsted about it a little more. But then I finally called them up, and then you have to sell it to the composer and you have to get them onto the project. So oh my goodness, the day you get the score, the day you first get the music, you're holding your breath. You're like, oh my gosh, what is this going to be like? Is this really going to be all that I hope for? And this symphony is, and I really mean this, like so much more than I hoped for. It really is, like in terms of the quality of the piece, the quality of the connection. It's really great. You didn't hear that.
How about a question from this side of the audience? Anybody over here? Yeah, okay, well, okay, you're close enough.
Scott might be a better person. I think we are in this situation where many orchestras have contracts in hand, and they've reached out to us, and there are some bigger orchestras. Maybe I can mention them, even though they maybe not. So I can't really name names at this point because I don't know exactly who is going to commit. But we have an orchestra in Europe that's looking at it. We have some big orchestras in the US that are looking at it. We have some medium-sized and some smaller orchestras. So I feel like it's a lovely cross-section, and I know it's only going to grow. I think a lot of people are waiting to hear this. They're waiting to hear the piece, you know?
There's a question up here. You're not you, the person right behind you had a question, I think. No? All right, then, yes. It's a foot race. You know, it's a foot race. Because, you know, as animals on this planet, we really like to consume. And our desire to consume is not so much tempered by knowledge about the effects of our consumption, but by outside events. So when that tornado hits your town, it changes your circumstances. So I go back and forth. I have nights when I go to bed and I'm not feeling so good about all this. And I have mornings when I wake up and I'm feeling a little better. So I really think, so first of all, to get beyond just the effect of culture on this, and I'll come back to the effect of culture in a second. I really think real world events have a way of balancing themselves out. The planet is reacting to what we're doing. I mean, and the planet is, you don't have to believe it's a conscious entity. It's simply a physical system with a feedback mechanism built in. And so if you put too much money in the checkbook, you spend too much money or whatever, it changes the balance of things. And that's a self-regulating system. I'm mixing metaphors so fast I can't even see straight. Anyway, so the point is that the planet is a system that has its own checks and balances, and it will make an accounting that has its actions on us because we're part of that system. Culture, you don't know how culture, none of us know. Culture is a really complex system of signs and significations. You don't know when a piece of music is commissioned, and somebody picks up a little tiny bit of that and it works its way into a score for a Marvel comic movie. And somehow that gets tempered back into the message that the movie is carrying about what happens with climate change. And you don't know how that effect is on some third grader who turns out to be the president of the United States because she's watching this and, she's thinking, oh, that's a heroine. And do you know what I mean? Well, but the point is we live within a political system, and that political system has to be affected one way or another if we're going to have genuine change that will affect our rate of consumption and how that works out. So
Let me add a layer to this
Yeah.
too. What I would say is that I can tell you that supporters of this project come from both sides of the political aisle. They absolutely do. And there is something magical about this community, and that is we do come together. We come together. I have witnessed it day after day around the artistic institutions in this community, that we have people sitting around the table from absolute polar opposite ends of political aisle and ideologies. There is beauty in that. There is beauty in that. When we get on stage and when we make music, we call all of those people to be present and to be open-minded and to listen. And when we listen to each other, when we are present together, that's how we change the world. That's how we change the world.
Scott?
I'm going to give him a microphone.
Sorry, I didn't intend to do this.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, no. Oh, well, new pieces of music, I think, often are have a lot going against them. Musicians show up, and the two things we can do really well are play notes and complain. And so, so a new piece that's hard and thorny and that you have to concentrate and doesn't, fall naturally, gives us something to complain about. And so that happens. Often they're not rehearsed enough because it is a new, in this case, a very new language to speak, not just a new, sort of vocabulary in many ways. And there's techniques you have to do. And then if the orchestra isn't dedicated, if there isn't time, if there isn't a wonderful piece, if the conductor needs to polish the Beethoven symphony that's on the second half for pictures of an exhibition, it gets under rehearsed. And then you come in, you listen to it one time, are overwhelmed by 40 minutes of music that took Jimmy 7 months to write. You get to hear it once, often not played well, and then you say, I hate it, I don't like new music, play Beethoven. And so context like this, what you're getting to experience in hearing about the piece, you have a point of entry that allows you to come to it with not sympathy, but with an open mind for how to approach it. And then when you buy the live stream ticket and support the orchestra a week later and hear it a second time, you'll say, oh, wow, even more. And there's this spiral of reoccurrence in classical music that makes you love music more and more the more you hear it. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
So Scott, it's amazing to have Scott in the audience with us. So you have a player in the orchestra and you've got someone who is passionate about nature and the Nature Conservancy and a member of our community who we've known for a long time. So this is the best part of doing a live event, right? It's really hard to pull that off on Zoom. So Claire, we're a little over our time. Would you go ahead and wrap us up and say closing stuff? Well, so there's a couple of things. I had no idea how Jimmy was constructing the score from research and the mathematics he was deploying, right? His kind of checkbook, composer's checkbook. For me to see those numbers and see the patterns embedded in them and how he handles those to actually translate that into a piece of music, not just sonification of data, but music, was a revelation. I have never seen a cross-disciplinary manifestation like that in the history of art and environment. It's going to be part of our archive. So when you go upstairs and you see the materials and the cakes, imagine all the sketches on napkins that came before. You see this. I want the napkins, right? So yeah. So that's what that's done for me, is and built an entirely new dimension to the photographs. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Bill and Jimmy and Laura, so much. We're looking forward to the weekend performances. Thank you all for being here. Again, you're welcome to go upstairs. Thank you.
Thank you.